Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back, all disciples of Hadith and lovers of the Sunnah and its sciences, to another installment of Hadith Disciple Critical Book Review. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala nabi. Amma ba'd. The work that we're sharing with you in this installment is called Studies in Hadith Literature with a Complete Hadith Terminology. Studies in Hadith Literature with a complete hadith terminology, and the author is Omar Ahmed Kasir. Omar Ahmed Kasir. The book in general is a good book. It's a good read. It's worthy of your time. It's worthy of your money. It's highly informative. Walillah alhamd. That's what we feel about the book after studying it, reviewing it, and benefiting from it. The specs of the book is printed by Al Firdaus Limited. In London, 2005 was the first edition. The copyright information. There is no excerpt on the back. Then we have the table of contents. Page 3, Islam, a religion that promotes knowledge. Definition of hadith. The need for hadith. The obligation to follow and obey the sunnah of the Prophet. When were ahadith first written? Who are Ahlul Hadith? The crusade against hadith and its causes, endeavors of the Muslim scholars for preserving hadith, the conditions for the acceptance of hadith, an introduction to the science of hadith, hadith terminology, and the bibliography. Khairan, inshaAllah. The book is about 100 pages, 99 pages with the bibliography to be exact, and a few pages in the back promoting their other publications and works which don't necessarily concern us right now. So it's 100 pages. This is where the book was printed. It was in London, distributed in London. Allah Alam, where it was printed was distributed in London, published in London from 2005, the first edition. So let's get into the specifics of the book, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. First and foremost, we have the prose of the work. Number one, the author quotes from diverse sources, multiple sources, not of one style, not even sources of authors of one religion, but he has a diversity of sources. Number two, the author gives many explanatory examples in his section on hadith terminology. And we all know what the ulama of al-Islam say, وَبِالْمِثَالِ يَتَّضِحُ الْمَقَالِ. وَبِالْمِثَالِ يَتَّضِحُ الْمَقَالِ. With examples, things become clear. After that comes the bibliography included in the back of the book. Then we have a robust and aggressive writing style. The author did a good job of blending both offensive and defensive styles and tackling the doubts and polemic issues surrounding hadiths in general and specific hadiths. A blend of defense and offense, of taqreer and of rad, bringing the shubha, refuting the shubha, etc. And it's very extremely important to be a balanced fighter, quote unquote, when you're writing, to be balanced, to know how to take someone attacking what you believe in and defending it properly, and also to go on the offense and to strike and make preemptive strikes on your opponents and those who are you're differing with scientifically, and not just for everything to be defensive and reactionary. After that, we have the suitability of the book for diverse and mixed audiences. The book can be read by a beginner. The book could be read and you can benefit from it being someone who's intermediate, or as being someone who's an expert. Someone who's advanced. It's suitable for all audiences and levels. And then we have high academic content. High academic content can be found in this book. Walillahi alhamd. Let's move on to some of the cons of the book. First and foremost is an obscure bibliography. We mentioned as a pro that he included a bibliography, which many authors don't, translation or not. But here we have a bibliography, but it's some things which are off, and some things which are totally lacking with regards to the bibliography itself. After that, we have no information whatsoever provided on the author. No information whatsoever on who is Omar Ahmed Kasir. Who is he? What qualifies him or disqualifies him to write on this topic and to speak on this topic and to tackle the things which he tackled and addressed? And those who have been following these critical book reviews since the beginning, you'll see that a lot of the books, if not most of them that we've reviewed, we find consistent flaws. And this is probably the most consistent flaw. People, they write books and then nothing is mentioned about the author of the book. Nothing. Where they're from, we're lost in it. We're left in the dark. And the same applies to those who translate. The next con of the book is lack of consistent referencing throughout the entire work. Lack of consistent referencing and citing or quoting in the specific sources, the masadir and the maraji'. Sometimes he does, oftentimes he doesn't. And we know that consistency is needed with regards to that. Then we have misspelling with regards to the Roman transliteration and distortion. Not just a typo, but distortion in Arabic. And an example of this would be Qurayb and the Isnad narrating from Abdullah ibn Abbas with Qurayb, and it says Karib. So it's not a typo, but it's actual distortion. It's muharraf, and it's written the same, Qurayb, Karib, in Arabic, but it's musaghar, it's different, and that's not how you pronounce his name. His name is not Karib, it is Qurayb. And that's a problem in the sciences of hadith. As far as the notable quotes in the book, then alhamdulillah, there are many of them. There are many notable quotes in the book. The first of those that caught my attention, and maybe we can quote on with regards to page 8. It says, he quotes from Dr. Mazhar U. Qazi. In the introduction to his Treasury of a Hadith, he states, the Sunnah and Ahadith are not to be taken as the wise sayings of sages and philosophers or verdicts of rulers and leaders. One should believe with full conviction that the words and actions of the Prophet Muhammad represent the will of Allah, and thus one has to follow and obey them in each and every circumstance of life. That's definitely a notable quote. We have many more. Let's go to the back of the book. Let's go to page 84 for a bit of diversity. On page 84 it says, Al-Hadith al-Munkar, a denounced hadith. A hadith narrated by a sole narrator, with a text that is not known through any other chain of transmission. Now you may ask yourself, how is this a notable quote? It's a notable quote because oftentimes in Arabic, and that's a long discussion with regards to the mutaqaddimin and the mutaakhirin, and long debate and much controversy surrounding those terminologies. The definition of al-hadith al-munkar, and many people in the 8th century, the 9th century, the 10th century, up to today, they just give it one definition. Al-hadith al-munkar, ma rawahu da'if, mukhalifan lithiqa. And that's it. The narration that is reported by a trustworthy, reliable narrator opposing the narration that is reported by a weak, the narration that is reported by a weak narrator that clashes, contradicts, and goes against the narration of a trustworthy narrator. And they make that the only definition, and any other definition is wrong and incorrect. And alhamdulillah, the author, he chose to mention that definition. The hadith al-munkar has several meanings. And from those meanings is the hadith which is la yu'raf, as it's in linguistic, it is unknown. And the hadith that goes against and clashes the authentic reports and things like this. Khairin inshallah. Another notable quote from the book. Let's turn to page 51 in the middle of the book. Let's see what we have. Says Professor D.S. Margulies says, its value in making for accuracy cannot be questioned, and the Muslims are justified in taking pride in their science of tradition. Lectures on Arabic Historians, Calcutta University, 1920, page 20. Tremendous statement, and it's a statement which is well known in Arabic. فَلْيَفْتَخِرُ الْمُسْلِمُونَ بِعِلْمِ حَدِيثِهِمْ. It says, let the Muslims take pride in ilm al-hadith. This is a non-Muslim saying this, an Orientalist making this statement. And we know that the Arabs, they would say, إِنَّ الْفَضْلَ مَا شَهِدَتْ بِهِ الْأَعْدَى, that true props come from enemies. True recognition comes from your enemy. If your enemy gives you respect on the battlefield, then it means you're a tremendous warrior. All right, for non-Muslims to acknowledge and recognize the perplexing feat in the history of the human being, and that is ilm al-hadith and the epic and the event of the isnad and the naqd of the matan. Khair, inshallah, perhaps we'll just take one more notable quote. As we said, there are many of them. On page 38, it says here, it says, the ultimate trophy that the Western man sought by his daredevil venture was the Muslim mind itself. In order to rid the West forever of the problem of Islam, he reasoned Muslim consciousness must be made to despair of the cognitive certainty of the divine message revealed to the Prophet. Only a Muslim confounded of the historical authenticity or doctrinal autonomy of the Quranic revelation would abdicate his universal mission and hence pose no challenge to the global domination of the West. Such at least seems to have been the tacit, if not the explicit, rationale of the Orientalist assault on the Quran. And it says, from Method Against Truth, Orientalism and Quranic Studies by S. Parvez Manzoor, Muslim World Book Review, Volume 7, Number 4, Summer 1987, page 33 to 49. Tremendous statement with regards to the plots and the plans of the enemies of Islam and destroying the Muslims, taking away their minds and getting them to lose trust, respect, and the ilm al-hadith, and to make them bewildered and take them far away from the heritage of the Prophet ﷺ and his sunnah. And that's a long discussion, and we're not here to talk about that in detail with regards to these types of things. Khair, inshallah. So those are some of the notable quotes. Now, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, let's get into the sins and the specific sins of the book. And obviously, as we've said before and explained before, the specific sins of the book are not cons, but the actual akhta ilmiya. Akhta ilmiya, specific mistakes and specific errors, and not just a khata fil manhaj, a mistake with regards to writing a book or the style of the book, which would be a con, etc. Alright, so unfortunately, there are a few specific sins of the book. The first one that I have written down here is on page 7, in the beginning of the book. It says here, in addition to the above verses, there is an authentic hadith confirming that the sunnah is no less important in interpreting the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ said, undoubtedly, I'm given the Quran and the like of it, i.e. the sunnah with it. Sahih al-Bukhari. Ala wa inni utitu al-Qur'ana wa mithlahu ma'ahu. He says in Sahih al-Bukhari. Is that in Sahih al-Bukhari? Is that hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari? So if it's not in Sahih al-Bukhari, that takhrij is going to be very problematic, and that's a specific sin. Page 58. The author says, conformity of the hadith. This condition stipulates that one's narration should not contradict another's narration transmitted by someone more authoritative and reliable than he. For eccentricity means the case in which an authority's narration contradicts another transmitted by someone more authoritative. Such a case may happen when the authority's narration includes an addition or decrement which is not concordant with another narration carried by someone more authoritative, and there is no possibility of harmonizing this variance. Such contradiction preludes the authenticity of the hadith. Early scholars, including Al-Khattabi, Al-Bukhari, and Muslim, did not stipulate this condition. Their definition of authentic hadith was less stringent. Ibn Hajar also tended to hold this attitude. So Al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, did not make a stipulation of salamatul hadith min al-mukhalafa wa min al-nakara wa min al-shududh. Bukhari and these early ulama, Bukhari and Muslim, they didn't make a stipulation that the hadith cannot be shadh, cannot be munkar, cannot be wahm, cannot tusadim, clash and butt with the other authentic proofs, and there's no way of harmonizing between them. That wasn't the condition of Bukhari and Muslim, and they just mashaw ala dhahir al-isnad, thiqa, dabit, adl, muttasil, and that's it. Is that what's being said here? If that is what's being said by the author, then that is extremely erroneous and very dangerous, and Allah knows best. Page 60. The author says, the explosion of Islam in the 7th and 8th centuries confronted Islamic scholars with a daunting task: to preserve the knowledge of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Hence, the science of Hadith evaluation was born. The birth of the science of Hadith evaluation was in the 7th and 8th centuries. What do you mean by that? The foundations, the asl, no question, Hadith evaluation is in the time of the Prophet himself, and the time of the Sahaba themselves, and the Tabi'een, etc. Now, it reaching full swing, it reaching its momentum, its peak, its maturity, its ripeness, so on and so forth. Wallahu ta'ala alam. page 72, and there are a few, but there are many more, but we won't mention all of them. It says here, speaking about as-sihah as-sitta, the six sound books. He talks about Al-Jami' as-Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari. He says he also traveled to Egypt, Basra, Kufa, Baghdad, and Syria. His greatest work, Al-Jami' as-Sahih, took 16 years to complete. It is said that he collected some 300,000 to 600,000 hadiths, of which 200,000 he memorized himself. And of those, he selected 7,275, which he deemed to be the most reliable and authentic. The scholars of Islam have unanimously labeled his collection the most authentic book after the Book of Allah. What's problematic about that? Does Imam al-Bukhari have 7,275 hadiths in his book, which he considered to be the most authentic? Or there are 2,500 hadiths that he considered to be most authentic, and then he repeated them and he mentioned them in different parts in different books? So Imam al-Bukhari's book has how many hadiths in it? 7,000 hadiths more, or less than 7,000? So if Imam al-Bukhari repeated the hadith 3 times, 5 times, 10 times for him to deduce and extract the fiqh rulings from the hadith, then in actuality there aren't 7,000 hadiths that Bukhari considered to be the most authentic. Rather, there are only 2,500 hadiths, or 3,000 hadiths that he turned into 7,000. So that is a khata ilmi, and that is an erroneous explanation. Then we have more specific sins on page 73 and on page 74. Page 73, it says here, and this is very bad. It says his jam includes fewer hadith than the previous two above, 2,200 or 2,020. Sama at-Tirmidhi rahimahullah. He says, but it is known for his critical remarks concerning the chains of narrators and the points of differences between the 4 madhahib. So Imam al-Bukhari, he only mentioned the khilaf of the 4 madhahib. What about Ishaq ibn Rahawayh? What about Sufyan al-Thawri? What about Sufyan ibn Uyayna? What about the other ulama that weren't included in the 4 famous traditional orthodox madhabs? So that's erroneous. Imam at-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, he mentions the madhahib of the ulama other than the 4. And this is an example, brothers and sisters, of ta'thir al-fiqh wal-fuqaha al-hadith wal-muhaddithin. It's the effect of the jurists and those madhabites, the madhabiyin and the muqallideen and the muta'assibin, their effect on ilm al-hadith and on the authors who wrote about hadiths, and thinking that there are only 4 madhabs. And it can only be 4 madhabs, and there's nothing outside of the 4 madhabs. And that's wrong, and that's erroneous, and that wasn't the style of At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah. At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, he mentioned the qawl Shafi'i, it's a qawl of Ahmad, it's a qawl Malik ibn Anas. He mentions Ahlul Kufa more than Abu Hanifa. Sufyan al-Thawri from Ahlul Kufa. Ibrahim Naqi, this one, that one. He mentioned several ulama, and not just of the 4 madhahib. فَهَذَا قُصُورٌ غَيْرُ مَقْبُولٌ. That's unacceptable. Then we have on page 74, the author, he says, Al-Jami', the book which includes hadith, categorized under the following 8 categories: Sir, Adab, Tafsir, Aqad, Futun. It says here, Futun. Is that a typo, or is that a mistaken Roman translation? Fitan, and not Futun. And then it says, Ishrat. Ishrat. What's Ishrat? Ashrat as-Sa'ah. Ashrat as-Sa'ah or Al-Ashrat, but it's not Ishrat. Then on the next, we have a few lines down. It says Sunan, the book which only includes hadiths that are related to the rules, ahkam. For example, Sunan Abi Dawud and An-Nasai. That's wrong. Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah ta'ala has Kitab al-Ilm. He has Kitab Sunnah. There are other books in his Sunan that are not pertaining to just ahkam. So that's erroneous. The last specific sin is on page 99. It says here, he quotes Gold, Zaire, Ignaz, his work, etc., the different books in the print. When was the book printed? Okay, for example, it says here, Hanafi, M.A., a survey of Muslim institution and culture. By who? What's the date? What's the print? So that's what we meant when we said an obscure bibliography. Alhamdulillah, despite all of those specific sins, it doesn't mean it's a bad book and you can't benefit from it. Then we have scrutiny and further investigation needed on page 9, which is not necessarily a specific sin, but it's something that could be, and it needs further investigation. Listen to this. The author, he says, belief that Muhammad was inspired by Allah to act wisely in accordance with Allah's will led to the acceptance of his example or sunnah as supplement to the Quran. and thus a material or textual source of the law. So the Sunnah is a supplement to the Quran, or is the Sunnah directly equal with the Quran min hayth al-hujjiyah, with regards to legality, with regards to legitimate, the legal force? Of course, the Quran is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in letter and in meaning, word and meaning. The Quran is superior with regards to muta'abbadun bi tilawatihi. You recite and get reward. The wudu, the tahara, etc. That's superior to the hadith. But the hadiths and the sunnah with regards to the laws and the rules, there's no difference between the two, as Al-Khatib Al-Baghdadi rahimahullah ta'ala has explained in detail. And then we have on page 29, so that could obviously be a specific sin, or that could just be a mahal nazar, a scrutiny. Wallahu ta'ala alam, give or take. Last one is on page 28. The author, he says here, go and watch her. So she went and watched her, but could not see anything in support of her statement. On that, he said, if my wife was as you thought, I would not keep her in my company. And there's no specific numbering or reference, no takhrij whatsoever. It then says, the authentic hadith gives positive evidence that the divine law of Islam is not merely Quran. Beautiful, perfect. It says here, but Quran and Sunnah, for sure. Therefore, whoever held fast on one source for reference to the exclusion of the other, he held fast to none of them. Beautiful speech. If you're just saying the Quran or Hadith, you're not implementing the Quran, as we have explained and established, since both complement each other. The Hadith complements the Sunnah, and the Sunnah complements Hadith. What we just mentioned of the equality of the two with regards to law, they're the same, as long as it's authentic. Khairan, inshallah. At the end of the day, it is a good book. It is an excellent book. It is a very informative and academic and interesting and intriguing book. And the score that we give it is 4 out of 5 quills. 4 out of 5 quills. Alhamdulillah, is a very excellent grade. 4 out of 5 quills. The good clearly outweighs what is criticized and critiqued from the book. Studies in Hadith literature with a complete Hadith terminology by Omar Ahmed Qasir. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters, for watching and for tuning in. If you wish to comment, add something, or make a request, we appreciate all feedback, positive and negative. Until the next installment, fi hifdh al-kareem.